battle machine, homie. You made it. Come on, you guys. Make some noise for him.
Hey everyone, how's it going? In the week that had passed, I had been playing Need for Speed Prostreet, a game that has, in my opinion, aged gracefully and has developed more appreciation from long-time Need for Speed fans. But how it's treated now is a lot different to back then. And back then, it was one of those games that I ended up rejecting because of how it was, regardless of whether it was actually a good game or not. And as a kid, my earliest Need for Speed experiences were High Stakes and Hot Pursuit 2. And Need for Speed is a franchise that has had a pretty confused identity over the past few decades. But with my earliest experiences, I was too young to grasp that identity of what it was really about. I just enjoyed the games and that was it. Then Underground came and changed everything for me. Tuner cars with stylized and exaggerated body kits and vinyls and neons, showering the cars in the neon nightlights in the city. It was the Fast and Furious dream come true. The people behind it looked at the first film and thought, hey, why don't we take the cars and make an entire game based on the cars? And Need for Speed Underground is literally that game. And Underground 2 was a continued evolution and realization of that idea. Most Wanted brought the best of both worlds, the customization of Underground and the chaotic police chases from Hot Pursuit. It was a smash hit, and at that time it was my favorite Need for Speed. With Carbon, it was basically Most Wanted at night with crew mechanics and an atmosphere that was closer to the Underground games. Nowadays I actually prefer Carbon over Most Wanted, but more so for its aesthetics and vibes while still maintaining the handling model from Most Wanted, which is still fantastic by the way. At this point, I was excited for more Need for Speed, and if it was anything like those two, then I was all for it. Then came the reveal for Prostreet, plus all the details that followed. I wasn't really sure what to think of it at the time, since it wasn't really what I expected at all. Gone was the illegal street racing in the open worlds and the cop chases. Instead, Prostreet opted for a festival-based legal racing scene, a complete departure from the previous 4 games. This was at a time too where people including me were accustomed to what Need for Speed had turned into, so naturally I was disappointed when Prostreet didn't exactly meet those expectations. But I decided to try it out and rent it from a local video store to see if I would end up liking it anyways, and unfortunately at the time it didn't really click with me at all, and it was primarily due to the fact that it wasn't really what I wanted in the first place, and as a kid, when I found something I loved, like say Most Wanted, I wanted more experiences like that, and that's also why I loved Carbon 2 at that time. And street racing games was the type of racing experience that I enjoyed the most. I didn't touch the game again and forgot about it when Undercover got announced, which was a return to form experience that made me think, now that's more like it. Well, I would rent it and play that game too, only to end up hating it. For me, it felt like a worse version of Most Wanted in almost every way, and I dropped it. After that, I stopped playing Need for Speed and time would pass until later on in my young adult years, I would pick up Need for Speed Heat because it looked alright, and that game ended up, getting me back into the series, from this point onwards. Fast forward to now, and I've experienced a wide range of racing games as well as other types of games too, and since then I've developed a more open mind towards different types of racing experiences, which in effect has led me to revisiting Need for Speed games that I didn't like before, like Undercover and Prostreet, as well as ones I never really got around to playing like Shift 1, Shift 2, and The Run, which I plan on playing at some point. Undercover though is still shit, but the Reformed mod is great and the PS2 and Wii version is quite fun. But Prostreet on the other hand, man, what a fucking fantastic game through and through. On my first revisit, as an adult, I had realized how good the game actually was, but couldn't really finish it due to bugs and crashes after beating a king. But this year I decided to give the game another crack and really open up to a more challenging style of play, setting it to king mode and transmission to manual clutch. And let me tell you, in my opinion, this is the best way to play Prostreet. You get a much more raw feeling of the handling system, and gear shifting with manual clutch is much quicker regardless of your drivetrain, since it more so boils down to your inputs. It was awkward at first having to be conscious of another button when changing gears, but after a while I got used to it, and now I can't go back to regular manual anymore unless I have no choice. Playing the game now with all the experiences that I've had, I was able to have a clearer vision as to what was being achieved in Prostreet, to take a step back and think, we could do another street racing game, but if we did, it would have to be very different. Otherwise, we'd just make the same thing over and over again. And Carbon was a result of that, even though I love that game. And look, while doing the same thing isn't inherently a bad thing, it can over time corrode the quality when complacency kicks in and, you realize you don't really have to try anymore and you just end up doing the bare minimum, since nothing really comes close to providing the same experiences most wanted at that time besides Carbon. Prostreet, on the other hand, was an opportunity to go in a completely different direction that challenged the established identity of Need for Speed at that point. And in terms of the execution, they did a fantastic job with the game. It was just the reception that ultimately brought it down, where a lot of people, including me, rejected it for not being what we expected or wanted. Not being another Most Wanted or Carbon-like experience. And while I do regret my treatment of the game at that time, I'm not rushing back in time to tell my younger self, hey, give Prostreet a proper chance. I had different opinions back then, and I had different tastes, and I had a lot more to learn about life, and that is the case today still, only I know a little bit more now, and I'm much more open-minded towards different types of games than I was back then. And with Prostreet, I understand that it was a necessary move to reset the creative juices that Black Box still had at the time. Everything from Hot Pursuit 2 to Prostreet was truly a golden age period where each game had so many things going for them. And with Prostreet, I'd still say that it provides one of the most unique track racing experiences out there today. And so, what are some of the things that I like about the game? Let's start off with the setting itself, which is ironic because it was the very thing that turned me off of it in the first place back when it came out. The festivities matched with the pro track racing courses breathes a lot of life into them, giving the most barren places a needed glow up that created a sense of excitement unique to the setting, where these weren't just races but a whole event that was unfolding across the world. It also happens to set itself in real life locations along with a few fictional courses, meaning that the game is unrelated to the other Need for Speed games prior to it. It's in its own unique bubble, and I don't doubt that it's had an impact on other festival races as well that came afterwards. But I think Prostreet hits a certain balance where you don't start to become annoyed by its presence like you do in the later Forza Horizons, but rather excited for future events to come, except for Nevada speed races. They are atrocious. Same goes for the Tokyo ones too, although for very different reasons. The atmosphere also reflects the more upbeat atmosphere, which is a stark contrast to Most Wanted's grimy rundown setting, and even Carbon's neon lit nighttime setting too. Prostreet is the kind of place where you would have a good time in, even if you were just spectating the ongoing races. So all in all, it was a really cool setting that, is still quite unique in the series. And so far it hasn't really been matched since in the aspect of, say, festival races, because it strikes a good enough balance where it doesn't, go in your face all the time. It kind of exists in the background while you enjoy the other parts of the game. Speaking of which, the game is just stacked with cars. And there are some surprising additions too on the table, which is increased further by modding. The customization is also really good too. I'll admit I was pretty lazy with my vinyls and decals, but I appreciate just how much shit you can throw onto the car to make it feel like your own and not just be like a team car like in Race Driver Grid. Although I will say, it's a shame that Prostreet didn't make room for the player to create their own team of racers, kinda like how the other Kings would have their own teams and drivers would have similar liveries to match the team they were a part of. Maybe if they had more time in development they might have done it, but oh well. As for other things, I also appreciate the progression system that strikes a balance between being linear and open-ended. In each section, you have race days to dominate. Complete enough races and get enough points, you dominate the event. If you don't do well enough in the race day, then you need to either redo the races to do better, or revisit the race days later until you're ready. The goal is to unlock the super promotions in order to reach Ryo Watanabe, the game's main villain and showdown king. You play as Ryan Cooper, a person that can't brush their teeth who came from street racing and is now in the track racing scene. You have only one goal here, get to the top, and that's it. So, you don't have a, clear name, even though you were framed for something you didn't actually do, or, you're not trying to get your car back after losing it in a blacklist race. In Prostreet, you start from the bottom and you get to the top, that's it. And in the context of this game, that's all you really need. The real meat and potatoes of Prostreet comes from the car variety, the customization, the tuning system that's more in depth than Most Wanted and Carbon combined, and also some of the best sense of speed the series has ever had. The race types are a blast. Grip is just variations of circuit but can be quite challenging later on, especially in the G-Effect race days. It also has hands down the best drag mode in the entire series. Like finally, a drag mode that doesn't absolutely suck like it did in Underground 1, 2 and Most Wanted. Straight lines and fast speeds is all you need, and Prostreet was the one to finally understand the assignment. Like I said with Underground 1 and 2 and Most Wanted, they just suck. They tried to add more flair to the events, but ultimately they end up just being more frustrating than fun. They just end up being events you want to get out of the way as fast as humanly possible so that you can move on. The only good thing about those events in particular is that they're short. That's it. And in Most Wanted, it's even worse. However, in Prostreet, it's short, but incredibly fun to do. Wheelies are also sick to pull off, but you need a fast enough car and some tuning adjustments to get it right. If you want to win every other drag race though, just get a Supra. The thing is busted. The fastest time that I got on it so far was 6.96 seconds, which, the crazy part is I hadn't even touched the tuning on that car. I just maxed out the performance. And that's another thing, the game gives you a lot of cars to play with, and with the right tuning you can generally make them viable for any event, but sometimes without the necessary adjustments. And yes, some cars you can't use for drifting, but you can use for every other event. And again, on the topic of adjustments, any car can be tuned with, and when you go into practice mode, you can also edit the tuning for the car until you're satisfied with its performance. And the results will vary. They'll either work out really well, or they can be absolutely disastrous, which leads to another topic, car damage. In Prostreet, damage is very, very unforgiving because the damage model isn't just, visual, it's also within the handling system and also a consequence of reckless driving that leads to you either having to pay more for the car itself or to get it fixed entirely when you total the vehicle. And speaking of the damage model, it's absolutely fantastic. You can really see the deformities on the vehicle much better than you could in the previous 4 games. And from what I've heard, Need for Speed Shift also has a really good damage model too. Prostreet as a track racing game, along with its damage model system and also the penalties involved with it, incentivizes clean racing where you can't afford to be too rough anymore. And while there are times where I would take a lot of damage, I would still be conscious of those consequences, knowing that I would have to spend resources on repairs, whether I've, sustained light or heavy damage or I've totaled the car. Either way, there would always be a price to pay for it. In Most Wanted or Carbon, I could be a dirty as fuck driver and the car will still run, but not in Prostreet. There's always a price to pay, and given that you don't have cops or traffic to worry about anymore, for me, it's a fair trade-off to keep the game challenging and to also reward cleaner racing. As for difficulty, it does amp up later on. The drift and speed events can be pretty brutal at times, more so the latter, whereas drift is awkward until you learn to throttle control more, as well as angling and tap braking to stay on the track when close to the curve. And some drag races can be a bit of a pain in the ass, especially with the Nevada straight where you have the up and down hills, or the other race track where you have the lampposts in the middle, where if you can't control the car properly, you'll just, hit straight into an object and then your car will just be totaled, just like what you saw there. But going back to drift, it does take a bit of adjustment, and I have used that word a lot because Prostreet is a game that has a lot of adjustment that you have to sort of get through to really appreciate how it plays and what you can get out of it. After a few drift events, I was able to, get a decent handle even on some of the worst drift tracks because I needed a certain amount of points, and as long as I could reach that number, knowing that the other opponents couldn't reach it, I was pretty much good, even if I did really bad on round 2 and round 3. Although I wish there was a circuit-based drift mode where you could enjoy the drifting mechanics much longer, because I do feel like the drift events are way too short for what they are, but I know that it's sort of based off of real life drift events where it's also, pretty short and to the point, but that's just me though. As for the speed events, I love them and I hate them at the same time. The sense of speed is incredible here. You really feel like you're on the razor's edge, and it's satisfying when you hold it together and make it despite the risks involved. But I hate it because a lot can go wrong. Hitting other cars, going on the sand in Nevada, hitting the walls in Tokyo, a lot of things. And if you have a car that's quite bouncy, then you're kind of fucked. This is why tuning is so important here, because you get much more out of the cars. And the thing is, with Prostreet, it's not always about horsepower. For example, I had a Skyline with over 1,000 horsepower, but Rudy Chen was always able to close the gap with me, even though his car had a lot less HP. And this is also why I mentioned the car variety, because with the right adjustments to the car, you can make just about anything work, which is what makes Prostreet so replayable. From the challenges to even just experimenting with different cars and different tune builds, adding to a handling model that's very different to most modded and carbon, but also a handling model that's really good when it works. You have channels dedicated to analyzing Prostreet, showing that there's much more to the game than people realize. And even after beating all the kings, including Rio, I'm still thinking about what I can do in the next run, and what kind of cars should I try next time. Prostreet screams personality that matches the legal track racing scene with style, along with a banger soundtrack that gives a solid mix of rock and electronic with some hip hop sprinkled in between. I really can't think of anything significantly bad to say about the game other than some annoyances, and again, it's not to say that the game is perfect. I mean, there are certainly things that annoy me, like I just said, and there are some frustrating moments too and things that I don't really like, but those aren't really things that, have a big effect on my overall opinion of the game, because I still think very highly of this game now. And Prostreet is just such a unique experience that does so much right, and it pretty much has a spot now in my top 5 Need for Speed games of all time, as it currently stands anyways. It was a game though that also had to contend with other racing games that were killing it between 07 and 08. And again, the reputation that Need for Speed had for being known for, street racing with customization, also had a negative effect on Prostreet. I rejected it as a kid, realized it was a great game on my first revisit, and on my second revisit, I can now say that it's one of the best Need for Speeds ever made that deserved much better. So if there's a game that you hated as a kid or didn't like at that time, consider revisiting it again. It might be different or it might not be, but either way, it's worth checking out. And Prostreet is absolutely worth playing. Thanks for watching.